All right, how's everyone doing? I am Rich Celenza. Thanks for checking out the Rich Celenza Show. So, what I think I'm going to call this podcast is Don't Be Afraid to Embarrass Yourself. Now, I first want to say I'm not talking about embarrassing yourself where you're going to be in jeopardy of losing your job, or if you're in school doing something where it's going to lead to something where you get in trouble or anything like that, or that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm going to be talking about is basically learning how to build confidence up to where you're not afraid to kind of be who you are, say what you want to say, and kind of do what you want to do. Because I think what happens with a lot of people is they limit themselves because they're always afraid of being embarrassed. They could be embarrassed of the way they look, what they say, what they do, where they go, all these things. And I think a lot of times to build confidence, to kind of get over that, just takes time. It also takes a lot of rejection, and it takes a lot of getting over insecurities and all these different types of things. In this podcast, I'm going to kind of go through things that I went through regarding having confidence and then being deflated. Kind of this emotional roller coaster I've gone throughout my life. And I just recently went through it, and I actually thought I was entirely over it. I help men teach confidence. And I think what people think when it comes to me is I'm always confident in everything I do and I say, or I'm super confident. And the reality is I'm not all the time. And I think that's one of the things about being confident is knowing your strengths and weakness, but also understanding that no matter who you are, I'm going to have setbacks, especially emotionally. And again, you got to have the confidence to say these things, but I'm going to kind of tell you how things went up and down for me, and it may be able to relate to you. And I will say, I heard a stat lately that the number one thing people fear is public speaking, which is understandable. They fear that more than death. So it's kind of like if you went to a wake or a funeral, you'd rather probably be dead mentally or emotionally than you would going up and speaking for the eulogy, let's say, for instance. That's very interesting to me. And that's one of the reasons I heard that. And I'm like, wow, I got to kind of give a story real quick on kind of how I went through this. Because I think a lot of people, they want to express themselves. It doesn't mean they want to become a public speaker by any means. And I'm not saying that you got to go out and do that or take a class, which a lot of people are like, you want to get over your fears, go take a class. I've actually done that. And I did it when I was young, which was really weird. But when I was younger, my father, I talk about a lot of times, owned a nightclub. And then he had a DJ booth. I was like 7, 8 years old. And then the band Kiss was out. And a lot of us liked Kiss back then. So I asked my dad, could you play Kiss? And he said, come on up here. I'll have you say whatever the song is. I think it was I Want to Rock and Roll All Night. So he brought me up there and he's like, hey, I'm going to introduce my son. And, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like shitting in my pants. I'm 7 years old and my father had a DJ booth that was elevated in his bar lounge. So there's a lot of people there looking at me and they already knew me. So I go up there and I'm like, I want to introduce Kiss. I Want to Rock and Roll All Night or whatever the song was. And then I expected them to clap or get excited for me. Because a lot of times when my dad would say anything, I don't care what it was, because it was kind of the disco phase at one time, then it was like AC/DC phase, rock, and whenever he said, kind of came on to say some of the songs he was playing, they'd go crazy. Me, I said the song and I just got completely ignored. And I almost felt like, holy shit, like they don't like me. I'm little. They love my dad. They don't love me. What am I doing up here? I'm just a kid anyways. This was stupid. So I never went back up on the DJ booth. And then he actually ended up DJing at another big club. And I would just literally hide under the DJ booth. I'd go with him sometimes if I spent the weekend with him. And I would just watch him spin records and do all this stuff. We'd go pick up records. And I always remember that. And then I went to junior high, I remember. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Why do I always feel like I'm kind of scared here? Or I'm in the shadows to a certain degree regarding certain things, like, say, with a mic or just speaking out. And I took this class, and I'm like, fuck this. I'm going to go heads up. I'm just going to be the first one to do whatever. So it was a public speaking class in my junior high. I went to a really incredible junior high. They did all these different things. Even you could take a journalism class. You could take a public speaking thing. And they were really, really cool at school. I was just a horrible student, but these classes I excelled in a little bit. But I was when I went to that class, they were like, all right, you pick a project at the beginning. It could be, so I did one on Florida. I liked tattoos then. I did a tattoo thing. But I was the first one to create the project that raised my hand to go up first because everybody else was scared. And the truth was, every time I went up and did my shtick, I thought at least somebody would acknowledge me, clap or anything. No one gave a shit at all. I was like, what the hell's going on here? And what was interesting is as the year went on, a lot of those students were building up confidence. They were getting better. And the teacher made everybody had to go up. Everybody had to go up each time on the project. So, you just had to do it. It wasn't like you could create something and not do it. You had to go talk about it in front of all the students. And I was getting more and more deflated. By the end, I was the last one to go up. And a lot of the other ones that were last were first because I just mentally didn't think anyone really liked what I was doing because I had so much passion for it. They really didn't care about what I was picking, which again is understandable. I'm also not looking at it from, me being in the audience and looking at them. I'm not clapping either. I'm just looking at them. So what was interesting though, a couple things in junior high happened that kind of altered things, I think, for me. And one was somebody did a project on me towards the end of the year. And what it was kind of about the way I dressed in school, how I was kind of all over the place. And he liked it. And I never knew this because one day I would go in wearing, I didn't like really jeans, but I would wear different style clothes all the time. And I never looked the same. And he pointed this out. He's like, man, Rich will come in a t-shirt one day and these pants. And then the next day he's wearing like an Italian coat and a turtleneck. And then the next day, because I would still go to Florida with my family often, I'd come back with, say, a fluorescent or a neon or something funky. And then the next day I would be preppy, I'm just saying. And then the next day I'm wearing a leather coat. And I didn't like I said, denim. So everybody else is usually always wearing denim pants and with a polo shirt. Or something in that style. So he did a whole thing on me and my crazy fashion sense. I was like, wow, that was pretty cool. And he's like, I hope you're cool with me doing this. I said, no, that's pretty dope. Now, he took another art class, too. So if you fast forward, then he's like, Rich, the reason I did this, too, is we have an art class. I don't take this class. He's like, would you mind coming down and we're going to draw you. We need a model up front to just sit on the stage and just... I know you bring something in that you want to wear, and then if you could model it for us, and we'll draw it. Because he was a friend. He knew my family was in the fashion industry and all that. So I came, and I'm the littlest guy. So I went up there for the day, or the class, I should say. And I think I came back a second day, and they all drew me. And it was cool because I saw these different pictures of how I looked up there. And I actually almost sat with my legs crossed and with my arms. Like it was a model pose, and I'm this 90-pound kid. But I wore I wore these jackets we used to wear in Cicero in Chicago with my Italian, you had your names on it, but it had the Italian collar. And I wore that with something underneath it with some, I don't know what the hell. And they loved it because of all the colors. And then it hit me then that I was on stage, I started again to build confidence again, that people were acknowledging me. And I wasn't even saying anything. I was just sitting. And then if you fast forward a little bit, I had a cousin that was doing very well, a model, and then I ended up going to modeling school, and it was kind of interesting. That was later in high school, but all those little things started to lead to me having the confidence to do that, to go model, to do runway and stuff. I was too short and too thin at that point in time, which sounds crazy. I was just too little. But then I did some acting, and we did some commercial audition stuff, and it kind of stemmed from there. But here's the deal. I still have these times where I feel insecure, and I also embarrass myself a lot. And the reason I go back to the embarrassment thing is because I think that's the stem of what really puts the brakes on us. And I'm here to tell you, a lot of times you may be really wanting to say certain things, but again, you're afraid of what everyone's going to say. Just say it. Now, again, I'm not saying it if it's going to get you in trouble or it's absolutely way over the top inappropriate, or you're going to say things to hurt people, maybe to the level, that it's going to hurt them and all these different types of things. Again, I'm just talking about having the confidence to kind of have the discussions you want to have, or even if you're meeting a woman for the first time or just want to talk to a woman publicly, or even talking to a man that you'd like to talk to about a certain subject. Understand, a lot of times the things you're going to say are going to really embarrass you. It's going to happen. You're not going to be flawless in your life. I'm just telling you. And you got to take the hit. I say a lot of crazy shit. And I get away with it. And I think I got that from Eddie Murphy Delirious. Years ago, I just kept watching Delirious when I was younger. And I use the word ass and shit and all this. And I'm thinking, and comedians. I should say Richard Pryor. My father was obsessed with Richard Pryor, Red Fox, and other comedians as well that we loved growing up with. It could even be Dice Clay, Andrew Dice Clay, and all of them. And it was just kind of how I talked and being in that lifestyle forever. Of course, I'm not going to talk to my mother like that or family members, but you put me on the streets, I could flow with the best of them. Even kind of do bits. And, you know, here's something too. I'm going to bring up a couple things actually. So when my family gets married, or a family member, I have a massive family, they used to say, Rich, get on the mic, say something crazy, do something. You do the announcements, because I would screw the names up sometimes when the wedding party would come in and we'd have a blast. And they knew, for some reason, they knew I would do this and they liked it. And I said, well, we got to kind of come up with a concept a little bit. So I came up with, let's acknowledge everybody who's been married from like 10 years on. And we would go through the list of all the family members and friends, and they would give me the list. I'd say, get the list of everybody, and then I'd be at the, you know, we'd introduce, they would ask me, actually, not the DJ a lot of times, to introduce the wedding party, so I do that for them. And then I get on the mic, and I'm like, we're going to acknowledge everybody who's been married, starting at 10 years, if you would, you know, just clap your hands or whatever. I'd started 10 years. By the time I started to hit 25 and 30 and 45 years, people are clapping and standing up, and it's really touching. And the reason I came up with that, I was actually recently divorced. And I was like, you know what? It's hard to stay married. And it's hard to, you know, have a family and do certain things. These people, I thought, should be acknowledged. Because a lot of times you go to a wedding, and unless it's your wedding day, no one really gives a shit a lot of times about you. But, you know, if I just thought it was time for others to get acknowledged. And it went all the way up to almost 60 years old. I have family members that have been married almost that long, which is crazy and amazing. And one time I was there, and one of my cousins was marrying another family from Wisconsin, and they were from Illinois. And then the mother of the party, we forgot somebody, and they were married like 40, 50 years, and she came running up, and she's screaming at me. She's like, hey, you didn't mention these two. And I said, oh, okay, I don't have them on the list. Tell me their name or whatever. And she's screaming it at me, and we're laughing, and I'm playing it off of her. And then she walked away, and I said, man, these cheeseheads. You know, like I just said it as a joke. And everybody started laughing at Chicago, kind of, and a little bit of the Wisconsin people. But I said something else, like, these fucking cheeseheads. They're aggressive, like, just as a fun thing. And I'm like, uh-oh. I went too far. Did I embarrass myself? I don't know if she liked it or not. We never talked about it. But, again, I'm going to put my foot in my mouth. That's the whole point. These things are going to happen when, it doesn't matter if it's publicly or not. And I am going to wrap it up with this. And a lot of times, I think no matter who we are at times, there's fear. And I call it the shit in the pants time. And I just recently actually went through this, and I would have never expected to go through this. Oh yeah, I should also say a lot of times when someone passes away in my family, I get picked because I'm like the oldest, either grandson or the oldest nephew on one side or the youngest. So I'm always kind of, I'm not saying give a eulogy, but I always talk a lot of times. They pick a certain amount of family members to talk at either the wake or the funeral. And a lot of times I get picked. And I'll tell you, something that's really hard to speak, at. And I did one for my uncle, and it was devastating. It emotionally drained me the whole week. I'm telling you, like, just thinking about it. It's almost like if you get picked for a best man or a maid of honor and you got to do that speech, and, there's a lot of people. When you get picked to do that, and I've been picked a few times to do that, you're like, holy shit, like it isn't easy emotionally, but it drained me so much so my grandmother passed away, and I think people thought I would speak, and if you don't speak at the wake, which I didn't do, and I didn't get asked to actually at that one, which was a nice break, at the, the reception afterwards, after the funeral, all the families get together and have late lunch or early dinner or whatever. And they were all going up, and they tell unique stories about, whoever passed away. In this case, it was my grandmother. And all my uncles and everybody was going, and I'm the oldest grandson for her. And I couldn't get up there. And I kept letting everybody else. I said, you know what, I'll save me for last because I got some really great stories. And somebody would go, and they're like, okay, it's your turn, Rich, at my table. Or other people kept coming up. They're like, Rich, you got to go now. That's your grandmother. You grew up with her. You've been with her since she was like 30 years old, something crazy, 33 years old. I'm like, yeah, I know. So I actually realized afterwards I was scared. And I emotionally didn't know if I can handle that at that point in time. So I got up to literally walk up there, and I was walking up there. And it was over. Somebody walked right in front of me and said, "Thank you for all coming out," the people at the reception, and said, and that was it, and they shut it off. And I was kind of shocked because if anybody else in there, and I think anybody else would have thought, like, I'd be the first one up there, or I wouldn't have a problem. And again, these are things I think we all go through in our life, that we have good days and bad days, I call it. I don't care how much confidence you have or not. You may not always be, as good or the best. You just, or just have the balls to go do what you normally do. And I just wanted to bring this up, and it's just something I kind of battled throughout my life. And I tell people, just because, again, I have a lot of confidence doesn't mean I'm confident in everything I do or at every single moment of my life. Because I can assure you, if you took me to go skydiving, which I don't want to do, and if you said, let's go, I would shit in my pants. I'd really not know what to do. But if maybe you took me and said, "Rich, let's go do this," I don't know what it is, I'm just saying, I have no problem doing that, which a lot of people could never see themselves doing. So I definitely understand my strengths and weaknesses, and I kind of look at it maybe as when I was younger, when I would play sports a lot. And I loved team sports, but I loved individual sports, especially if there were a big audience, because it was just me versus the other person. But I will say, when I'd lose, I felt embarrassed, and it was the worst feeling. But as I got older, I became an adult, I'm realizing all those times I wrestled or played tennis or boxed or whatever, one-on-one type of sports, it made me stronger. It didn't make me weaker, even though at that point I was embarrassed and I was ashamed. So hopefully this may have touched some things on you, but I'm just telling you, don't be afraid to, a lot of times be who you want to be, express what you want to express. And I know it's hard, and the reality is you are probably going to say things that aren't always right. You're going to probably say things that are going to maybe even embarrass others, hurt others, not even knowing it. But you have to get over it. You have to understand people are going to do the same to you, and we have to learn to forgive, and most importantly, forgive yourself. All right? I'm going to wrap it up there. If you want to know anything about me, you can just go to richcelenzashow.com. My program is masteringselfconfidence.com. That's the one I help men with confidence and all that crazy stuff. And I'm all over the place. So take care, and I wish you nothing but the best.